Well, let's go ahead and start. I usually find that when you start, others come. I'm not quite sure how many more are coming anyway. So Gio and Kyler, this is exciting. I'm glad to get to the JavaScript. We're guys starting to get to the fun part. I hope everybody sees it that way. And anyway, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So I think maybe Kyler can present himself. Yeah, I present myself like 2 days ago.
hmm So I'm Kyler. I'm just another grad student working in the hydroinformatics lab. Been here for a while, longer than some, shorter than most. So yeah, and I've just helped Geo. I consider Geo to be the real JavaScript expert. He's the one who's really been working hard at work on a lot of things in JavaScript. As much as it's a learning experience for you, there's also a learning experience and refresher for me trying to make these tutorials in JavaScript. So hopefully it all works out and we can get you going with JavaScript.
Perfect. So just to jump ahead, uh, pretty much what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to cover as much as we can. With Kyler, we think we can cover most of it. So we are gonna give some time at the end so people can start the hands-on because we think that the hands-on is actually really applicable to doing Tetis app because it will be like making a version of a Tetis app just in plain JavaScript. So it's actually a nice hands-on exercise. So with that in mind, I think we are just going to start. So pretty much what
Hey,
JavaScript.
let me before you start, let me just put it out there. Any questions from what Gio talked about on Tuesday with the HTML and CSS before he jumps into JavaScript? No questions. Were you able to get through some of the exercises, or are you still working on that?
I was able to get through the hands-on at the end.
Code pen and
Yeah.
I got all the way to the hands-on exercise, but I haven't completed them yet.
good. So it was helpful, Travis, Anna. You feel like you at least got an introduction. You don't feel totally lost with it all.
Yeah, I thought it was a great tutorial. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. It's really complicated, but I thought the code pen was really helpful to be able to see it in action and compare the HTML to JavaScript.
Good. Well, and I think, again, this is more to expose you to these ideas because until you have your own project and really need to use it, then sometimes it's hard to fully understand what you're doing. But all right, go ahead, Gio. Thanks.
Okay, so yes, pretty much to give a quick intro of JavaScript. JavaScript is pretty much the dominant language in web programming. So usually when we are talking about like web programming technologies, we talk about three things: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, HTML will give the structure of the web page, CSS will give the style and the arrangement a little bit, and JavaScript will give functionality. In other words, namely to be more specific, will be you can create a button or anything on JavaScript on HTML, but JavaScript will give functionality to that. Pretty much JavaScript was introduced maybe in 1995. The name JavaScript comes because back on that day, Java, which is another language, was the main language and it was pretty popular. And that's why they named it after that language, even though they are completely different, just for marketing purposes. So when you hear about the Java language and you know JavaScript, Java is different. It still has some of the same concept that most of programming languages have, like variables, functions, objects, but it's a complete different way to program in Java. With that, I don't know if you have any question up to this point. Okay, perfect. With that, I'm gonna share my screen. So pretty much, I wanna recommend this book. When I learned JavaScript, I use this book in my class, and it's actually pretty nice. And most of the tutorial is based on this book. And just to give, for example, a quick example, if you go here, let's say to high order functions, and then you can see all the different examples. But at the end, there is a part for exercising. If I'm not wrong, if I remember right. Yeah, there we go. So you have the exercises here, and you can actually type things here. You can actually put your code here and it will execute. So it's actually really nice because it's a free book that you can also put your code in the exercises, so you can practice in that way. That's why it says your code goes here. And then you can put run code here and it will do it for you. You see, and I didn't do nothing. That's why it's undefined. So it's actually really cool. It's called the Eloquent JavaScript. And that reference here, just to show you where I got all the information. Okay, now we're gonna wrap into the program structure, which is pretty much how JavaScript is defined. One of the main concepts I think in JavaScript and in most languages are variables. So I'm just gonna go pretty quick into it because I think some of you know already what's a variable. Pretty much a variable is a way, it's something that can store data in one way and also can be a function. It can add functionality because you can define a variable to be a string, a number, or a function or an object. So a variable can be pretty much anything that stores data or that gives functionality. And to demonstrate this, what we can do, I'm just gonna open a random tab so you can see how we can play with this. So if I put this, I don't know if you see that, this is just a normal tab in my browser, and if I put inspect element in Mozilla Firefox, I think Google Chrome just says inspect, then you have here a console, and the console is in completely JavaScript. So I can define things here, and I can say bar, name of the function, hola, and just give it 2, and do that. And now it's saying that it's undefined, but don't worry about that. But then if you want to test what's that function, what's that variable, then you can use this function that it's pretty common. Console log is a function you're going to use a lot. It's just to print things. And then you just put hola, which means you want to print what's the variable hola, and it will give you 2. And as you can know, like if you try to redefine or redeclare a variable twice, if I say var hola, yeah, it will not fail here, but if you have your code and you have both variables all are redefined, like var hola, it's gonna fail because it's gonna tell you you are already declaring a variable. So don't do that. Just declare once. But now if I put console log hola, it is still 2 because this is wrong. It will not obey that. After this, you can change to that, and then if you put that, it will give you 3. So pretty much that's most of the concept of variables. Just to add something, you can declare a variable with var or with let. So if I use let, I can put, I don't know, hola2 equals hola, and then put that. And then I just can put that, and it's gonna print it. And also you can notice I have been using semicolons, and pretty much I'm using semicolons because that's how you finish any line in JavaScript. When you're declaring a variable, you finish with a semicolon. When you're declaring a function, you finish with a semicolon. You always use semicolon. If you don't use it, it's gonna fail. And besides the let, you can use cons. Cons. I will just put that. I usually like to put my constants with capital letters, and then you can put the same. And then you can see that. Yeah, so pretty much that's variables. Pretty simple, and also like I really wanted you to see that you can actually play with this with the console in your browser. So now it's time for Kyler.
Awesome. Thanks, Gio. And real quick, in the Google Doc for the introduction to JavaScript, there were some code pens that were after each of the like topics. Have any of you been able to look at those or go through them? And if so, do you find them useful, helpful in any way?
Yeah, I thought those were really helpful.
Okay, because I made those up and they're kind of just, they don't cover everything, but they're just kind of a distillation of what I deem to be useful at this stage. So it's good that people actually got some use out of them. And by all means, if there's any feedback that you would want to give, feel free to do so. Leave a comment in the Google Doc or let me know. Either way. Anywho, so moving on from variables, and a very important part of JavaScript is writing functions. I'm just going to share my screen now. Let's see. Awesome. So this is the code pen for the function exercise, if for those who haven't gotten the opportunity to look at that. So, and as Gio said, JavaScript mainly adds functionality to web pages. So for example, these buttons here, if it was just pure HTML, they wouldn't really do anything, but through the power of JavaScript, they can change. And that's because they were assigned functions to these buttons. And the way you write a function is that first you define it by writing function, and then more often than not, it's given a name, and it can be any sort of name, as long as it follows the same naming convention as variables. No special characters at the beginning, like hyphens or underscores, etc., etc. And then as for defining what you want the function to do, you define it inside curly brackets. So this example function here tells the function, or tells the JavaScript in the console, which would be displayed here if we wrote it in the JavaScript pane, just print you wrote to the console, and then you declare the function, show console, and then it would just write to the console, kind of how Gio showed beforehand. And functions are very useful because once you define a function, you can pretty much call it anywhere else inside your web page, and you can call it as many times as needed, repeat it, loop through it. It just really, pretty much, I view functions as the backbone of JavaScript coding. So, but however, most of the time you wouldn't really need, or I guess it would be kind of cumbersome if every time you called it, you had to manually call it, like by pressing a button or reloading a web page. That's why we usually link functions to events. So, and events are just things that happen inside an HTML element, such as a paragraph or a button or the entire page, for example. These buttons above, they have the event on click. So every time you click it, the function goes, oh, you clicked it, so I'm going to use that function now. Also, if I'm going too fast or if I'm not making any sense, speak up, let me know. Anywho, and so as you can see from the, or let's see. Yeah, sorry, I got a little lost there for a sec. Another useful thing about functions are anonymous functions. As you can probably guess from context, anonymous functions are functions that have no name. While you can't necessarily call these functions from anywhere since they don't have a set name, they can be useful in that in the one space you need them, you can just call it. So in this basic example, we define a variable as button1, and then here we assign this button right here, which is given the ID button1 to this variable. And then this variable is given the onClick event. And then on that click event, it's called, an anonymous function is called. It's anonymous. You can tell it's an anonymous function because after the word function, there's no name. There's just the parentheses. Then after that, we define what we want the function to do, which here we just print to the console. You click the anonymous button. So if we click it, ta-da, you click the anonymous button. And as I said before, anonymous functions you can't really call anywhere else except for this specific instance on the anonymous button as we assigned it or wherever else you assign it. Some people argue about the efficacy of anonymous functions because really it's like, why wouldn't you just name it in the first place? Then you can use it anywhere. But some people swear by the fact that you could just use it there. You don't need it anywhere else. And some people say it streamlines the code. I mean, I guess as you experience JavaScript for yourself, you can determine if anonymous functions are useful or not.
Tyler, is that the only way to, I guess, do you need to have an anonymous function in order to do that? Or could you just somehow have, when you click it, do this? Or do you need that to say this is an anonymous function in order to call that method, I guess, or whatever it is on the click?
No, you can certainly give a function. This could certainly be a named function. If I'm not mistaken, these buttons up here are named functions that when they're on click, let's see. Yep. So this HTML code right here is associated with these buttons right here. So they're given the event on click, and then this first button calls the function change text, and that change text code is called right here. So it'll say, so this function change text says find the document element in the HTML given the ID demo, which is up here. And it'll say change the HTML content to hi there. Well, I guess the demo is actually this paragraph here, but it'll just call that function and display the new text. And then the second button calls the function change text to, and then it'll say both of these buttons are using JavaScript. So I don't know if that answers your question or clarifies a little bit.
I think my question was more, are functions the only things that can do it? Or like, can it not be a function? Could it just be, I don't know, I guess not a function, I guess does that make sense what I'm
It
trying
does
to say?
make sense. And as far as I'm aware, functions are the only method, although Gio,
Okay.
if you know any different.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's fine, Tyler. That's fine what you say.
Mhm. So yeah, functions are basically the only way that you can change things, I suppose, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that was it. Thanks.
Yeah. So that's basically it on functions. And then from there, we can jump into arrays. And you could just think of arrays as basically just lists of information that we need. And oftentimes in coding, you can have many, many arrays, and these arrays can be very, very long, especially when it comes to like geocoding or geospatial analysis, because often you can have a catchment shapefile. Have you guys had experience with GIS software, or so you kind of know what I'm talking about?
They've all had at least the 214 introductory to GIS, so I think they know what a shapefile is.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure before, I didn't want to get too ahead of myself. So anyway, so with a shapefile, you could have many multiple polygons, all with their associative information like the area, where it is. And so usually you can take all that information and then put it into an array. And as shown here, an array is basically just a list of information, and it can contain strings, numbers, all sorts of things. And you can even assign new variables based on the information contained in there. For example, this line assigns the value spade, or the string spade, to the variable x. And array indexes, it's important to notice, they always start at 0. So here, this is saying, all right, look in the cards array, and the first value, which is 0, spade, assign that to the variable x. And then if you want the second value, so if you want to assign the number 10 to the variable x, you'll need to say 1, and so on and so forth. I'm not exactly sure why it starts at 0. I'm sure there's a very good reason. I'm just not entirely sure. And with the arrays, there's also various built-in properties and methods that are particularly helpful. For example, the toString method, which you can just call by calling your array and then adding .toString. It'll just convert your entire array into a string in case you want to print it somewhere in an HTML element, for example, which I believe, just copy this over. Do run. Boom. It just prints it out as one string. No spaces though. Kind of affects the readability somewhat sometimes. And arrays are just helpful, and there's a bunch of other built-in methods or that you can use and experiment with here. But arrays are useful in that, as I mentioned before, they could just take large groups of information, put it into a list, and then you can call certain information within that list, assign it to variables, and then use those variables inside functions and just really interpret or analyze the data that way. And similar to arrays are objects. And objects are basically the same as arrays, except you can add, or the way that I would discern it is arrays are basically lists, whereas objects, you're really defining an object. Like in the real world, objects have properties, how big something is, the color it has, what it's made of, and they also have methods or things that they do, like they run, jump, float, freeze. JavaScript objects function basically the same way. They have properties, like a name, a number, and so on and so forth, and they have methods, things that they do. So here we just have two basic examples of an object where we define it using a variable. The object in question is state, and then it has a name, a number, a region, and an abbreviation. And those can all be considered properties, things that define the object. And methods are basically just functions inside that object. So every time, and they really only affect that object. So anytime you call that method, it just interprets the information contained inside the object and uses it in the function, or the method, I guess, in this case. It's all very intertwined, JavaScript. And yeah, it's a little just short introduction. I'm sure that's like I said, the first time I learned JavaScript, a lot of this went way over my head. And as Dr. Nelson mentioned, once you really dive in and take a look at it, it all starts to make sense later. But I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments, or maybe something they'd like to see again or go over in more detail. All right. I guess at this point, Gio, I'll pass it back off to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyler. So pretty much we kind of like cover the structure with Tyler in this way. So actually we can have a little bit more of time in order to do the hands-on practice. And also while you're doing it in this time that we're gonna left, you can ask questions to me or Kyler. So pretty much I'm gonna share my screen. And so this is the hands-on practice. And pretty much what we're gonna be doing, I'm just gonna show maybe the last, the final product. So it's actually, so you can see it. So if I put here, final product, so pretty much this is what you're gonna be building in the hands-on. It's pretty much a hydro beaver from Peru. And in the lab, we have done a couple of hydro beavers, so this will be a nice start to check how JavaScript and also how the things that we do in the lab match with JavaScript. For example, adding maps, adding an event. So here we're gonna manage a lot of arrays. Then we're gonna manage data. We're gonna see how to export other libraries. The hands-on walks you through it, so it shouldn't be that hard. So, and then you can see the functionality. You have to just zoom in a lot because the stream is really thin. And then you can see that you should be able to do this. And then you should be able also to have historical data and the seasonal. Yep, so you're gonna be able to do this at the end of the hands-on. This should be the final product. So pretty much the hands-on, it's divided in two parts. Okay, so the first part, pretty much it's about importing third-party libraries such as Leaflet. What's Leaflet? Leaflet, it's a library that let us import maps. Did you see the map that I have in the example? That's with Leaflet. I don't have to code the map. That would be hard, but I just import Leaflet, and Leaflet with one line of code give me a map, which is nice. So we're gonna do that in the first part, and then yeah, you can see that after that you will have this. And then after that, we are gonna also dive into like extending the Leaflet library, because the Leaflet library, it's an open source library. What's open source? That the code of the Leaflet library, it's on the internet, it's open to everybody. So if you wanna contribute to the code, you can do it. You can grab the code, change it as much as you want to fulfill your needs. So that's pretty much open source. It's a quick definition. So you're gonna grab that Leaflet library and you're gonna extend a little bit of the functionality to allow to have click events. So when you do a click, actually do something, because actually doesn't have that, the Leaflet library for double MS layers. And after that, that will be a part B of part one. But after that, as you can see, we're gonna do that. We're gonna have this at the end. So that will be the other thing that we will finish in part one. We will have this output. And then in the second part, we're gonna use some jQuery and also add some event listeners, which are also the click listeners we're gonna do it again. And you can see here, I just put the code that you should put. And also we're gonna use the library, a JavaScript library for the forecast, for the historical data, for the seasonal. So you shouldn't be, you should not have to do the graphs by yourself. So there's a library for that, so it should be easy. Here, there's a little bit of explanation about what each line of code kind of means. And the last part will be just to add the functionality to change between tabs. And that will be the end of the hands-on practice. And I think we have some time left, and I think it will be really, really useful if maybe you can start this, and then me and Kylie will be here until 2. And then if you have questions while you're doing this, we can answer them. I don't know if that works for you guys.
Why don't, how many of you want to work on it now and have them stick around? Why don't you raise your hand, or over in the participants page. And if you just want to work on it later and then send them a message or something if you have questions, that's okay too. So how many would like to work on it now and have them stick around? You know how to raise your hands? Maybe let's do the yes or the no icon. If you bring up your participant, you can either hit yes or no. Travis says yes. Annalise says no, she'll do it later. That's okay.
I'm good either way.
Anna will do it later.
Like Dr. Nosa said, by all means, if later you're working through it and you have some questions, feel free to contact myself. And I don't speak for
Yeah.
Gio, but I know for a fact that he'll be more than happy to help as well.
Yeah, yes, send a Slack message. That works.
We can end early now and you can do it when you're at that point. So that's totally fine. Alma, what's your preference?
Sorry, I lost connection for a second. What's the question?
Oh, they're pretty much done.
Uh-huh.
The presentation, but they would stick around here for the next half hour if you wanted to work on this now. But if you want to, if you're not kind of up to this part of the workshops and want to do it later, that's totally fine too.
Okay, I haven't quite gotten to that part yet, so we probably work on it later.
Okay. Well, I suggest we just go ahead and finish up for today. And then when you get to this point, you know how to contact Kyler and Gio through Slack. If you have questions as you're going through that, like any of the other ones, please go ahead and do it. And Travis, you can work on it now, but I don't think Gio and Kyler need to stick around. But if you have trouble, you can reach out to them. But I did want to talk to you for a few minutes anyway, if you want to stay on the call.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Kyler and GL. That was good.
Oh, thanks a lot for your guys' attention and participation.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyler and Gio. See everybody next Tuesday. And the new topic is up for a little bit of debate. It'll either be some more GitHub or some web services. So we'll see what is ready, but I'll announce that next week. Okay. Well, Travis, what Dr.
Yeah.
Jones might chime in here. He might have
Okay.
left his desk for a minute and be back, but we could go ahead and have conversation about the reservoir stuff if you want.
Yeah. So I guess I've kind of been looking around. I found one article and that I thought was by the authors. I'm not actually totally sure now, but it was on. It's called. Let's see, Understanding Satellite-Based Monthly to Seasonal Reservoir Outflow Estimation as a Function of Hydrologic Controls.
Who are the authors?
So it has Matthew Bonema, Sifat Sikdar, Yabin.
He's
Yeah.
at JPL. He's at Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Okay. Yeah, I think
There's more than one group doing this kind of work, right?
Okay.
And so the ones that did the reservoir, you know, have applied it probably to figure out reservoir storage capacity. But the technique, I think, that gets the water surface elevation from the satellite data is, you know, there's more than one group involved in that.
Yeah, and I think at least one of the authors was at least also one of the authors listed on that reservoir assessment tool page that you had sent to me. So anyways, I read through that and kind of, I looked at the reservoir assessment tool. They have linked a GitHub page also where they kind of list some functions, back end and front end things that they have, some of their code. Let's see. But yeah, I guess you mentioned last time we talked that you wanted to maybe do a kind of meet with Dr. Rollins too and kind of talk about
Dr. Hotchkiss, but it's Rollins Hotchkiss. I
Dr.
always have the
Hotchkiss.
same problem. If you start typing one of their names,
Yeah.
you'll either get Rollins because of Kyle Rollins, or you'll get Hotchkiss because of
Yeah.
Rollins Hotchkiss. So
That's right, Dr. Hotchkiss. So let's see, I'm looking at the email you sent me. So with that little, I think it was an equation.
Yeah, it's called the uniform soil loss equation.
Yeah, so let me pull that up real quick. Let's see. Potential. Okay, let's see. Okay. So did you mention last time that the main thing he was kind of the one missing variable is that the monthly, is it the rainfall erosivity? Is that what kind of he's interested most in, and what this could potentially help
Yeah,
solve?
and some of like I probably ought to start having all of you join our Monday meeting now, just as observationists to observe. Although you said you're not available Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12 to 4, but maybe when
Yeah, is that what time is that?
maybe when spring term is up though, right?
I am doing 2 more classes summer.
Oh, okay.
Also.
That's
I'm not sure. Let's see. What time are the meetings at?
There are Mondays at 1 is when I kind of meet with most of the graduate students, but I decided not to, because I'm having you guys meet frequently on training. You know, even though I'm beginning to introduce you to some of these topics to explore, I decided not to try to find a time and have everybody meet. But clearly now you're getting to the point that you're involved, you're doing some things, and it would be useful for you to see what some of the others are doing and why these things would tie in, right? I mean, so I have to start thinking about how to integrate a little bit more.
Yeah, so it looks like for summer term, I have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 12 and then 2 to 4. So if it's at 1,
okay,
I think I would be okay.
I'll probably start kind of as we finish the training here in June. I think I'll reach out and let you all kind of just observe, because now that you've also done some of this training, some of what they show and tell and talk about will make more sense.
Okay.
Whereas early on, I just thought anyway.
Okay. So as far as looking into this more.
But what I was going to say, what I was going to say about that is ENIC is creating an application that looks at global precipitation data sets.
Okay.
And for some of the others as well. But that's what Dr. Hotchkiss wants to do, is be able to use precipitation data as, you know, when it rains a lot, then you get more erosion.
Uh-huh.
The little part of his problem, though, is that we need to find some measure of intensity because, you know, you're not going to get rainfall data where you're lucky kind of if you get it every 24 hours. This is how much it rained. But, you know, a rainfall storm that has 2 inches in 2 hours is a lot more erosive than one that has 2 inches in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
So how do we figure that out? That's going to be, you know, we could use rainfall. We could use, obviously, when there's heavier rainfall, you know, over a period, it's probably eroding more. There's more water running down, the river's running high. Lots of things are happening, right, to turn it up when there's more water. And maybe there's a way we can kind of use a surrogate for getting erosivity, you know, rainfall. But that's what he's looking for in that variable.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so as far as looking into this, kind of more into this reservoir assessment, I'm just wondering how I should keep looking into it. Where kind of what
I think you're far enough.
Okay.
I think what we need to do, I talked to Dr. Hotchkiss yesterday, actually, because I was up at the office and saw him, and I said, we should try to set up a meeting, you know, in the next week or so, and now have a discussion. Now that you know, what you should do is try to prepare 3 or 4 slides that summarize what that web page is doing.
Okay.
That's what I'd like you to know, enough about just the bigger picture, even if you don't know the details of how the satellite works in order to determine it. And in the context of, you know, we would want to be using it to look at volume, you know, of reservoir, you know, that volume elevation curve, and maybe how it's changing over time. Is there a way to go back and say, you know, now it's different, right? But also in the context of looking at the runoff volume, what, you know, and how it fits into that equation. What's the total storage of sediment that the reservoir can hold? That's just using that information. So the way that reservoir data might help solve that uniform soil loss equation. And I expect Dr. Hotchkiss and his graduate student Razier to have most of the technical ideas. We just want to help brainstorm with them.
Gotcha. Just kind of bring some big picture ideas from what some other, like the reservoir assessment tool is doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So you said you wanted to arrange that for next week or the following week?
Yeah, but the other thing that I'd like to do actually is kind of bring you and Anna and Tessa and Alma together. I've had you doing similar kind, Evan is another one, similar but kind of different things. And because some of what they're doing might benefit you and vice versa in terms of your thinking. So I'm going to try to have that meeting next week.
Okay, awesome.
I'm going to try to organize something next week where we can talk. And that way there's some other things that are going on that might be useful when we talk to Dr. Hotchkiss. That they'll bring up. So I'm going to put something out and have everybody put together 4 or 5 slides about this research topic that I've given you, what you've learned, and I'll have you share it with each other first, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Okay, awesome.
And I also think that will help you begin to see maybe a little bit more why I'm asking you to do these things. Because it's kind of related. They're kind of related in some ways.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay, awesome. I'll talk to you next week in the next meeting. Or yeah, is there already a next topic? We're gonna have a meeting Tuesday.
So there's a couple of topics. There's 3 topics coming up, but I'm not sure which ones to do.
Okay.
One is the advanced GitHub, which was a 200, but I kind of feel like we shouldn't do the advanced GitHub till you kind of have your own project. At this point,
Okay.
you have the basic concept of GitHub. Until you're really ready to use GitHub on your own projects, I'm not sure if the advanced will be that as meaningful.
Uh-huh.
But I need to ask Dr. Ames and Rohit their perspective on that since they're designing it.
Gotcha. Okay. So,
And
but
the other topic is one of the lessons we have is how to edit our lab webpage. And
okay.
I'm not positive that I want everybody to learn how to do that. We kind of have one person, and so that material is there more for the next person who comes along to edit it that we've kind of documented. But I want to ask Dr. Ames, maybe he has another reason why it would be good for everybody. You know, it is good for everybody maybe to go in and edit, change, add an article, add their own research. So, you know, it might be just basic enough that, yeah, let's expose everybody to it. But I want to ask him about that.
Okay.
And then the other topic is now that you've done Leaflet a little bit and JavaScript, the next thing is how do you get a map in? How do you put a shapefile and other data and display that? And that's the next topic. So one of those three is going to be next Tuesday. I just haven't
Okay.
decided which one.
Gotcha. So there will for sure be a meeting Tuesday though.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. I'll see you next Tuesday then.
We have about one more week's worth of kind of foundational things. Then we're going to have you do the Tethys, install Tethys, create your own first app tutorial. But of course, I really believe when you do that, you'll see Python, you'll see CSS, you'll see HTML code kind of all managed together in Tethys. And so hopefully some of these pieces will come together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this will be, I tried to go through it just the last semester, the Tethys part, and it took me a long time to do just some basic stuff. So I think this stuff will help a little bit.
Well, you can probably have a preview then of knowing that you can probably understand why we're having you do all these things now that you struggled with Tethys a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because probably a lot of these little things you're doing are going, oh yeah, if I'd have understood that.
Yeah.
Better, right?
Yeah, the virtual machine, that alone took me a while, but now with the Mac Mini, I don't really need it because I can just do it on the Mac. So that'll cut some time for some people too, but yeah.
All right.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Dr. Nelson.
Thanks, Travis. We'll see
See
you.
ya.